Dear listeners, imagine, in a tropical land covered with vast forests, majestic stone cities rising on the banks of thundering rivers. Thousands of years ago, a civilization was born on this land, a people who understood the language of the stars, who understood the cycles of time, who blended both survival and majesty. The Mayans, their civilization that has left its mark on the depths of history, not only with their architectural wonders, but also with their connection to the sky and their prophecies. But how did such an advanced civilization disappear, leaving such a fascinating legacy? What secrets are hidden between those stones? And did those much talked about prophecies really foretell the end of times, or did they tell a deeper story? Today we will take a journey through the labyrinths of this lost civilization. We will read the stories engraved on the stones of the temples and try to understand their rise and fall together. This is a story that illuminates not only the past, but also the future. If you're ready, let's step into the magical world of the Mayan civilization. But remember this, each step on this journey will take you a little deeper into history and bring you closer to the next secret. So where do you think the first secret is hidden? Once upon a time, in this tropical land that now covers the southeast of Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and Mexico, life sprouted quietly and deeply. The forests were dense, and the sky was always full of mystery. It was in these lands, about 2,000 years ago, that a people was born who would give human history a unique gift, the Mayans. But this was no ordinary beginning. The first settlements can be traced back to 2000 BC. At that time, people lived in small villages, cultivating the land, learning the secrets of maize and shaping the world with stone tools. But there was one thing that set them apart from the rest: their fascination with the sky and the stars. Perhaps when they looked up into the tropical sky at night, they heard the stories the stars whispered to them. Over time, these small communities grew into villages, surrounded by the first stone structures created by human hands. Then, around 250 AD, a revolution took place. During this period, the first great city-states of the Mayan civilization were born. Cities like Tikal, Copan, and Palenque began to rise amidst the jungle, with sky-defying temples and finely crafted stone structures. Each was ruled as an independent city-state, with its own kings, gods, and stories gracing the Mayan landscape. The power of the kings came not only from their armies, but also from their connection to the sky. They were the representatives of their people, who spoke to the gods. Every drop of rain, every crop, depended on their prayers and ceremonies. These city-states competed not only in architecture, but also in culture and science. The first calendars took shape here. Following the movements of the sun, moon, and Venus, the Mayans understood time as a cycle. Every event had an echo in the past and a reflection in the future. That changed their view of the world forever. But there was always a mystery behind this fascinating rise. Why did these city-states make such a huge leap at the same time? What force drove these people from deep in the jungle so far ahead? And what was the fate of these first big cities? Ah, my friends, if the secret of the rise of the Mayan civilization lies in the sky, its reflection on Earth is hidden in their cities. Deep in the jungle, piercing the infinity of green, towering structures reached up to the sky. These cities were not only settlements, but also sacred places that united the world of the gods with the world of men. Cities like Tikal, Palenque, and Copan were at the heart of this extraordinary world. First, let's consider Tikal. Rising like a miracle from the dense jungle in what is now Guatemala, this city was once a gigantic center where thousands of Maya once lived. Tikal's most striking feature was its pyramids, rising defiantly into the sky. These pyramids were not just buildings, but sacred stairways, built to get closer to the gods. In the temples atop them, priests would pray, burn incense, and listen to the messages of the stars. The city had a carefully planned layout. In the center were the ceremonial buildings, while on the periphery were the houses where ordinary people lived. Everything was built with a harmony that reflected the cosmic order. Moving from Tikal to Copan, we see that this city stands out for its artistry and elaboration. Copan, located in Honduras, was a masterpiece of stonework. Here, huge stone monuments and columns told the stories of kings. Each figure, each carving, hid a story. Even Copan's staircases were not ordinary. Hundreds of stone steps adorned with Mayan inscriptions carried messages from the depths of the past. The city was a cultural center where science and art merged. The astronomical centers used to track the movement of the stars further strengthened Copan's connection to the sky. Palenque was another miracle. Located in the Chiapas region of present-day Mexico, this city was famous for its fine craftsmanship and elegance. Here, the architectural genius of the Mayans was even more evident. Famous for its palaces and temples, Palenque was also known for its legendary ruler, Pacal. Pacal's tomb was designed as the final resting place not only of a leader, but also of a god. The city was built in harmony with the natural landscape, as if nature itself was dancing with these magnificent structures. The architectural wonders of the Maya were not only mesmerizing in their beauty, but also in their functionality. Structures such as waterways, reservoirs, and agricultural terraces enabled these cities to offer sustainable living. But these structures were also a sign of power. Every pyramid, every temple, every palace was a symbol of a kingdom's majesty and closeness to the gods. Every detail told the story of how the Mayans perceived and shaped the world. But my friends, as impressive as the splendor of these cities was, what happened inside them? These great structures were not just piles of stone. They were full of life, rituals, and power struggles. But what was life like in these magnificent cities? Who built these wonders? Who ruled them? And why were they all abandoned one day? The answers to these questions are in the next part of our story. Ah, my friends, I will now take you deep into the Mayan civilization, into a sacred world suspended between earth and sky, where everything had meaning, from the twinkling of the stars to the rhythm of raindrops. For the Mayan people, life was not just a journey across the world, but a journey woven into a web of destiny with the gods. And every thread of this web was shaped in their mythologies, beliefs, and prophecies. Mayan mythology began with the creation of the universe. The sacred text Popol Vuh describes their belief in the beginning of the universe. They say that the gods first separated heaven and earth to create the world. But man was the greatest creation for which the gods sought a balance. In their first attempt, they made people out of clay, but they were flimsy and melted away. Then they tried men of wood, but they too were empty beings who did not know how to thank the gods. Finally, from corn, yes, sacred corn, the source of life for the Maya, they created man. This is why the Mayan people saw themselves as the most special creation of the gods, a sacred being in this world. This belief system dominated every aspect of society. The gods were not just beings sitting in the sky watching over the world. Each one represented and directly influenced an aspect of life. Cha, the rain god, was the center of all hope in times of drought. Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, was the guardian of wisdom and agriculture. Worshipping them, asking for their favor, was necessary to ensure the sustainability of life. The rituals performed on the peaks of the pyramids were not only religious worship, but also grand theaters in which the hopes and fears of the people were expressed. Sertela Mikesis to served, and then there were prophecies, my friends. Prophecies were sacred messages that carried the voice of the gods to the world. Mayan priests studied the movement of the stars in the sky, looked at the cycles of sacred calendars, and tried to read the future. Their calendars not only marked the passage of time, but also predicted when important events would take place. Will a war start? Will a king ascend to the throne? Or is a great catastrophe approaching? The answers to all these questions were hidden in the prophecies of the priests. The people had a deep faith in these prophecies because they had been proven true many times in the past. Prophecies affected not only the lives of individuals but also the order of society. If the priests said that the gods demanded a sacrifice, disobeying this order was unthinkable. Sometimes these sacrifices were precious objects, sometimes blood rituals, sometimes human lives. Without pleasing the gods, no battle could be won and no harvest would be bountiful. For this reason, Mayan society feared the wrath of the gods and went to great lengths to win their favor. But my friends, it is a more complex world than you think. Every sacrifice to the gods, every ritual, every prophecy reflected the strength and fragility of the community. But what if the prophecies were illusions? What if the people's unwavering faith in the gods would one day be shaken? Was this sacred world of the Mayan civilization destroyed by the beliefs that once glorified it? The answers to these questions await us in the next chapter. Oh, my children, let me take you to one of the greatest secrets of the Mayan people, their way of making sense of time itself. Because for the Maya, time was not just a passing process. Time was a sacred fabric of cycles, a journey that started at one end, traveled to the other, and then back to the beginning. We may be travelers walking straight from the past to the future, but for the Mayans, time was like a spinning wheel, a repetitive dance. Therefore, their calendar system was not just a date ruler, but a cosmic guide. The Mayan calendar was a masterpiece in itself. It consisted of three main systems. Hab was the solar calendar and represented a year cycle of 365 days, just like the calendar we use today. However, there was a difference. This cycle consisted of 18 months, and each month had 20 days. The remaining 5 days were considered inauspicious, and special rituals were performed to appease the wrath of the gods. Imagine, during those 5 days, people were almost afraid to breathe. Then there was Tzolk'in, a sacred calendar. This calendar was a 260-day cycle, and each day was under the influence of a god or sacred power. By combining these two calendars, the Mayans developed a complex system they called the calendar nest. Hab and Tzolk'in interlocked like two cogwheels, creating a 52-year century. When this cycle was complete, the whole calendar would start again. Ha'Beleta, this understanding of circularity, shapes their conception of the universe. And here we come to the great issue that confuses the modern world, 2012 prophecy. You remember, don't you? Back in those days, everyone thought that the end of the Mayan calendar would be the end of the world. But oh, my friends, things are not like that at all. The Mayan calendar did not end. It only completed one cycle, and a new one began. The year 2012 was the end of one great cycle and the beginning of a new one in their sacred calendar nest. So why was this date so important? Because the Mayans believed that such transitions had not only historical, but also spiritual meaning. During this period, it was thought that there would be a shift in the balance of the universe. Old energies would be replaced by new ones. The priests would look at the stars and look for signs of these cycles. The year 2012, the Mayans believed, represented a time of great transformation. But this transformation would take place not only in the physical world, but also in people's souls. But over time, this understanding merged with the fears of the modern world, and apocalyptic scenarios emerged. What do you think the Mayans would say to this? They were celebrating a rebirth, not an apocalypse. This cyclical way the Mayans saw time was reflected in their whole life. Everything repeated, day and night, life and death, war and peace. This is why they relied on their calendars to read the future. The prophecies were not only messages from the gods, but also profound wisdom shaped by the signs of these cycles. At the end of each cycle, the Mayan priests organized great celebrations because this proved that life was a never-ending cycle. But one question remains. How did such a complex understanding of time and a world of prophecies shape the Maya civilization? Or did these sacred calendars prevent their ultimate downfall? Let's meet in the next episode for the answers to these questions, dear friends. Oh, my friends, stop for a moment and look at the sky. Watch the stars twinkle in the darkness of the night. This is how the Mayans looked at the vast sky, but not with mere admiration as we do. They believed that the stars, planets, and constellations spoke a language, like cosmic secrets whispered by a sage. To understand these secrets, they opened not only their eyes, but also their souls to the sky. Mayan astronomy was the result of this spiritual quest. The Maya interest in astronomy was not a purely scientific endeavor. For them, it was a way of communicating with the gods. Every movement in the sky carried a message from the gods. The rising and setting of the sun, the cycles of the moon, the mysterious movements of Venus, they were all signs. Understanding these signs helped the Mayans determine their social organization, their agricultural calendar, and even their war strategies. Ah, my dear friends, think about it. What wisdom to be able to look at the sky and read what is written there. This wisdom was embodied in the extraordinary structures they built in their cities. The famous El Caracol in Chichen Itza is a monument to this genius. This structure was once the center for priests observing the sky. Seemingly shaped like a spiral, it was not only an architectural marvel, but also a functional observatory. The staircases and windows were so skillfully placed that the movement of the stars and the position of the sun on certain days could be observed with absolute precision. Close your eyes and imagine. On the longest night of the year, a priest watches the stars dance with a wooden instrument in his hand. This was not just science, but a sacred ritual. Venus was of special interest to them. For the Mayans, this planet was linked to the gods of war and power. Venus's cycles of appearances and disappearances in the sky determined the timing of both religious ceremonies and wars. Can you imagine that one planet in the sky can influence the fate of an empire? The Mayans believed that they were part of just such a cosmic order. Of course, El Caracol and Chichen Itza was not alone. In many Mayan cities, from Copan to Tikal, from Palenque to Uxmal, astronomy structures were built. These structures were used not only to communicate with the gods, but also to bring order to their people. The fires lit in these observatories at night were perhaps a greeting to the gods. Even by today's standards, the sky science of the Mayans is astonishing because they were able to calculate the movements of the stars, eclipses, and the cycles of the planets with incredible accuracy with the naked eye, without technological tools. But my dear friends, I cannot help thinking, if they were so wise, so far-sighted, why could they not foresee their own downfall? Why couldn't they read another destiny written in the sky? Perhaps the answer lies beneath those stars. In the next episode, we will take a journey into the collapse of the Mayan civilization to trace this question. Are you ready? Ah, my friends, imagine for a moment. The words that shaped your imagination are lost. Your thoughts, your identity, your history are frozen in stone, never to be read again. This is exactly how the Mayan inscriptions remained buried for years in silence. But each stone, each hieroglyph, hid a story within itself. Understanding these stories was like accessing the thoughts, dreams, and fears of the lost civilization. The Maya hieroglyphic script was not only a means of communication, but a sacred heritage. Each symbol represented a god, a king, or prophecy. This writing was painstakingly engraved on stones, monuments, even ceramic vessels. Ah, imagine a scribe, a sharp tool in his hand, a fresh stone tablet in front of him. Working in sweat, he was creating not just a text, but an immortality. Because for the Mayans, writing was a challenge to time. They knew that words are fleeting, but the stone is eternal. One of the major functions of writing was to consolidate the power and prestige of the ruling class. In the stone monuments of every city-state, the victories of the rulers and their ties to the gods were described in detail. Imagine a stone slab depicting the enthronement of a king in Tikal, or an inscription celebrating a battle victory in Copan. These monuments not only sent a message to their people, but also spoke to future readers of history. Unfortunately, these voices were almost completely silenced with the arrival of the Spanish. It took centuries to understand what their writings meant. At this point, one name stands out: Diego de Landa. Yes, my friends, this priest is one of the men who destroyed the written legacy of the Maya civilization. But ironically, he also left the most important record of the Maya writing system. His Relación de las Cosas de Yucatán became a guide to the study of Mayan hieroglyphs. But this was not enough. Deciphering the hieroglyphs was like solving a riddle of history. The study of epigraphy, the deciphering of these ancient writings, has been a long and arduous journey that stretches back to the 20th century. Many scientists and researchers have spent lifetimes trying to understand these complex symbols. The deciphering process received a major impetus with the Russian scientist Yuri Neonorizov. His groundbreaking work revealed that the Mayan script was not an alphabet, but a complex system of logograms and syllables. Each symbol represented a sound or an idea. These writings also revealed the world of thought of the Mayans. Their beliefs about cosmology, time, and the spiritual realm were hidden in these hieroglyphs. For example, on one tablet, the god Kinich Ajah represented the movement of the sun, while another depicted the cycle of Venus. Rituals of human sacrifice, agricultural calendars, and the sacred ties of rulers to the gods are just some of the themes these writings tell the story of. Each symbol was not just a word, but a world of thought. But my dear friends, the knowledge that emerged with the complete decoding of the Mayan script was only the beginning, because now we had a bigger question to ask. Why were the Mayans unable to preserve the glorious history they had carved in stone? What will we find next to unravel the mystery behind their collapse? Here, I'll be waiting for you in the next episode as we search for the answer to that question. Are you ready? My dear friends, imagine now you are in a big market square. All around you, vendors are shouting with joy, children are playing with laughter, and the wind is blowing the scent of cacao beans and fresh corn tortillas. This is one of the marketplaces at the pulse of Mayan cities. Trade was not only an activity where goods were exchanged, but also a tremendous force that shaped the spirit, the culture, and social structure of the Maya. Let's take a look at the depths of this trade together, all right? For the Mayans, cacao beans were much more than an ordinary agricultural product. Cacao was seen as a gift from the gods and was used both as a drink and as currency. Imagine, with a handful of cocoa beans, you could buy a rabbit or a pair of sandals. Cacao was also a sign of wealth and status, hence the dark, bitter drink drunk at special ceremonies in the palaces of nobles and kings. Cacao was one of the most valuable elements of the Maya trade, and this humble bean had both economic and spiritual value. But besides the cacao trade, other precious commodities also played a major role in the Maya economy. Obsidian. This black glass-like stone was used for everything from making weapons to ornaments. The Mayans valued obsidian not only for their daily needs, but also as a sign of power and prestige. Volcanic regions like El Chayal, one of the main sources of obsidian, were strategic points on trade routes, and these routes carried not only goods but also ideas, beliefs, and cultures. Another commodity as valuable as obsidian was seashells. For the Mayans, who lived far from the coast, these shells were exotic treasures from distant lands. Trade was not limited to local markets. Major Maya cities such as Tikal, Palenque, and Copan were the centers of regional and international trade networks. These cities had huge marketplaces that welcomed merchants from distant lands. In each market, traders from different cultures would share not only their goods, but also their stories, traditions, and knowledge. Imagine for a moment, I can almost hear the stories the traders tell each other as they exchange exotic feathers and jade. The economic system had a profound impact on the social structure. Trade increased the wealth of the noble class and shaped the daily lives of the peasants. On the one hand, there were the merchants who paid with cocoa beans, and the kings who organized grand banquets in the palaces with the wealth from this trade. On the other side, the laboring class, who used river routes and narrow jungle paths to transport their goods. This balance formed the social pyramid of the Maya. Trade routes were not only goods, but also the bonds that held society together. But let's not forget this. In a world where trade was so powerful, wars were often fought to capture these roots and riches. So what could have caused the collapse of a civilization where trade was so influential? How did the Maya economy lose its glorious structure? Let's meet in the next story to find the answer to this question. Are you ready, my dear friends? Ah, my dear friends, close your eyes and take a journey through the dusty corridors of time. You find yourself in the shadow of towering temples in one of the Mayan cities. On the steps of the pyramids reaching up to the sky stands a king who wears the sunlight like a crown. Below, the people watch this divine figure with bated breath. This image is a starting point for understanding the essence of Maya society, their complex social fabric. Mayan society was layered, like a carpet woven by the gods. At the top sat the king, Lord of heaven and earth. This leader, called a Jao in the Mayan language, was not only a ruler but also a bridge between the gods and his people. The king's role was not only to lead wars or collect taxes, he also shaped the spiritual life of his people. Imagine the king sacrificing his own blood during a ritual to gain the approval of the gods. This helps us to understand the reason for the people's respect and devotion to him. Blood was the essence of life, and the king did not hesitate to offer it to the gods for his people. Just below the king were the priests. Ah, these priests. They were wise men who could decipher the language of the stars and hear the whispers of the gods. The Mayan priests not only directed the religious rituals, but also controlled the astronomy, mathematics, and calendar systems. The people put great faith in what the priests said, because their predictions influenced when crops would be planted, when wars would start, and even the decisions of kings. The priests were an invisible force guiding society. What about the merchants? They were the moving veins of Maya society. Thanks to merchants, valuable goods such as cacao, obsidian, and jade were transported from city to city, and cultures and ideas were blended. Being a merchant meant not only wealth but also prestige. Great merchants hired mercenaries to protect the trade routes, and sometimes used their power to take part in the political games of kings. Imagine a merchant's caravan carrying not only goods, but also the bonds between peoples. And at the bottom were the peasants who formed the backbone of Mayan society. These people grew corn, beans, and squash in their fields, but also worked on the construction of the pyramids and served as soldiers in times of war. The peasants were the silent heroes who produced the food that was offered as offerings to the gods and fed the power of kings and priests. Their life was hard and humble, but the sacrifices they made to earn the favor of the gods ensured the continuity of society. But this complex social order was not just a hierarchical structure. Each class had deep ties with every other. Kings could not win the favor of the gods without the support of the people. Priests could not perform their rituals using exotic goods brought by merchants. The merchants needed what the peasants produced, and the peasants could not know when to plant their crops without the prophecies of the priests. It was this interdependence that allowed Mayan society to survive for thousands of years. But think about it. How did such a perfectly functioning order collapse over time? Why did the power of kings falter? Why did the prophecies of priests fail to win the faith of the people? How did the trade routes fall silent? Why did the peasants cease to uphold this glorious order? In the next chapter, we will pursue these questions and trace the collapse of the Mayan civilization. Are you ready, my dear friends? My dear friends, I will now take you to one of the deepest and perhaps most incomprehensible aspects of Mayan civilization. That strange and mystical world where devotion and fear of the gods intersect with the questioning of one's own existence. Mayan rituals and sacrifices. If you are ready, let's witness those moments when the smoke rises to the sky, the chants echo and the knives glow. For the Maya people, life was part of a cycle that did not end with death but continued with rebirth. For them, human existence was the result of the generosity of the gods, even a gift of their sacrifice. Legends tell that before the world was created, the gods had shed their own blood and breathed life into the earth. This is why the Maya people considered it a sacred duty to offer their own blood, sometimes even their own lives, to pay their debts to their god. Remember the towering pyramids of the Mayan cities, those majestic structures where you had to climb dozens of steep steps to reach the top. Imagine a priest ascending those steps, carrying a shiny obsidian knife in his hands and murmuring divine words. When he reached the summit, where he was closest to the world of the gods, the ceremony would begin. The Mayan sacrifices were not just a ritual of bloodshed. They were a spectacle that brought together all sectors of society. People gathered in the square to watch the priests pray and dance. The sound of chants, drums, and pipes made from seashells echoed as. And why sacrifice? Why did human life carry such great meaning? For the Mayan people, blood was the essence of life. It nourished the gods and increased their power. Captives, especially those captured in battle, were the focus of sacrificial ceremonies. These captives were considered one of the most precious gifts to the god. But these gifts were offered not only for the gods, but also for the integrity and in Maya society, these ceremonies were not only a religious duty, but also a political and social message. Through these rituals, kings not only strengthened their bond with the god, but also proved to their people their power and their status as the chosen servant of the god, the king who ruled with the consent of the god. But not all sacrifices were the same. Some were organized for major events, such as the construction of a new temple, while others were smaller festivities. In particular, the ceremonies for Chak, the rain god, reflected the people's relationship with agriculture. Sometimes a young child, sometimes a group of adults, would be dedicated to the gods to prevent Chak's anger from bringing drought. These sacrifices were seen as the price paid for the continuity of society. Now imagine your eyes fixed on the summit of those majestic temples. As the sky turns red, a priest bleeds from his own body to show his devotion to the gods, or a prisoner silently accepting his fate. As frightening as these scenes may seem, they were part of life for the Maya people, because for them, the way to gain the favor of the gods was through sacrifices in this world. But my friends, don't think that Mayan sacrifices are just a thing of the past. Even in the modern world, these rituals reflect the spirit and beliefs of the Mayan people. What about the fall of the Mayan cities? Why couldn't the blood offered to the gods by this glorious civilization save them? Let's discover this secret together in the next story. Saint Louis. My dear friends, we will now take a journey into the darkest, quietest period of the Mayan civilization. Do you remember the days when those majestic cities were at their peak? Dazzling temples, star-defying pyramids, crowded markets and sacred squares echoing the prayers of priests. These places, once teeming with life, have suddenly fallen silent, a tragedy in which the wind circulated between the stone walls, Nature reigned again, and people disappeared without a trace. So how did such a magnificent civilization collapse so suddenly? Let's discover this secret together. Mayan cities developed in a complex pattern over the centuries. Each city was interconnected, linked by trade routes. But these connections brought not only power, but also fragility. Because this great civilization had made a pact not only with the gods, but also with nature. And when this balance was upset, the majestic structures of Maya began to crumble. Some scholars say that the biggest reason behind this collapse was ecological. The Mayan people had cut down forests and used the land to the fullest in order to expand their farmland. But one day, this land lost its fertility. The cornfields were no longer as fertile as before. As people starve, pyramids that once defied the heavens have become meaningless piles of stones in the middle of barren lands. But the collapse cannot be explained by starvation alone. The Maya cities were independent city-states, each recognizing its own king. But there was constant competition, even hostility, between these cities. The ambition to control trade routes led to conflicts between cities. These wars not only led to bloodshed, but also shook the foundations of society, as leaders focused on increasing their own power rather than protecting the people. The people lost trust. And once trust is lost, is it possible for a civilization to survive? Another reason could be economic collapse. Mayan cities consumed huge amounts of resources to maintain their splendor. Wealth flowed not only to the cities, but also to the kings and nobles. But this wealth increased the burden on the people. Taxes rose, people had to work harder. Over time, this heavy burden drove people away from their cities. People left the cities in search of a simpler, more sustainable life. Now it's time to answer an experimental question. And cities have become places where only stones and silence are witnessed. But my friends, the fall of the Maya cannot be explained by natural or economic causes alone. Political upheavals, crises that shook the belief system of the people, and perhaps a weakening of the bond with the gods may have played a major role. Kings, priests, and common people were all part of the tragedy. But one by one, the lights of the Mayan cities went out. And now I ask you, was there another secret behind the events that silenced the Mayan cities? Perhaps it was a lost knowledge, a sign of a catastrophe. Perhaps between those stone walls, there is a mystery still waiting to be solved. But can this mystery be fully unraveled by modern science? Or could the wisdom the Mayan priests received from the stars be the key to this unsolved mystery? Let us continue to understand the legacy of this ancient people in the next chapter. Ah, my friends, now I will tell you about perhaps the most tragic period of the Mayan civilization. In that age of majestic cities, great temples, gods and heroes described on stone tablets, the shadows of Spanish ships fell. When foreigners from across the great ocean set foot on Mayan soil, the fate of this ancient people would change forever. Here we will now explore this turbulent period and the brave resistance of the Mayans. At that time, the Mayan cities had lost some of their former splendor, but they were still standing. The people farmed, practiced rituals, and remained loyal to their old gods, all the while trying to cope with the challenges of the new order. But one day, white sails appeared on the horizon. These sails did not herald peace or trade, but conquest and the search for gold. As Fernand Cortés and his men landed on the shores of Mexico, the drums echoing off the stone walls of the Mayan world gave way to the cold sound of conflict. Exodus chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. Providence helped men and their burdens to come down. The Spaniards confronted the Mayans with force of arms and the diseases they brought. At first, however, the Mayans may have seen these invaders as gods, or as a reflection of prophecies. These strangers were unlike anything they had ever known, their iron armor gleaming, their horses running with cannons that filled the battlefield with smoke. But this initial surprise soon gave way to resistance, because the Mayans knew that this land was their source of life. They could not remain silent while foreigners took the land from them. The colonization process continued as the Spanish methodically occupied Mayan cities. While some cities fell with relatively little resistance, others were the scene of years of struggle. Mayan communities, especially in some areas surrounded by jungle, developed resistance strategies to repel the invaders. They wore down Spanish troops with sporadic attacks, then retreated into the deep jungle. This land was their home as well as their fortress. Every tree, every valley was their ally. But the Spanish invasion was not just a battle of swords and guns, my friends. The diseases carried by the Spanish were like an invisible army for the Mayans. Smallpox, measles, and other deadly epidemics were one of the cruelest blows that broke resistance. These diseases broke down not only the bodies, but also the souls of the communities. Many cities have become ghost towns, losing large parts of their population. Nevertheless, the Mayan people did not give up their beliefs and identity. Some communities that came under Spanish rule sought ways to preserve their cultural heritage. Traditional rituals were blended with new Christian symbols. Gods lived on, albeit in the shadow of the Spanish gods. And deep in the jungle, far from Spanish control, some Mayan communities continued their ancient way of life. They survived in the hope of one day reclaiming their ancestral lands. Now I would like to ask you a question. Was the Mayan resistance a glimmer of hope at the time, or was it merely a slowing down of an inevitable end? Perhaps the story of this ancient people is not over. In the next chapter, we will explore how the legacy of the Mayans resonates centuries later in the modern world, and how their culture is still alive and well. But at the end of this difficult historical journey, were the Mayans really lost, or is their spirit still with us? My friends, let us now go in search of cities that have been lost in the mists of thousands of years, forgotten, but never truly gone. These cities sleep quietly in the depths of the jungle, as if nature has embraced them and protected them. Cities like Tikal, Calakmul, and Uxmal, home to the glorious lives of the Mayan people, were like time capsules to the modern world. But these lost cities were the protagonists of a long and complicated journey. From being a secret hidden in the silence of omniscient nature, to being handed over to the curious hands of modern archaeology. Tikal. Tikal. Lost in the dense jungle of Guatemala, it lay like a dream in the shade of trees and vines. Until the early 19th century, the world had completely forgotten about this majestic city. But one day, explorers wandering deep in the jungle spotted a gigantic pyramid. Years later, when archaeologists arrived in Tikal, picks and pencils in hand, the city presented them with a stone story of Mayan splendor. Every temple, every stone carving whispered of wars, offerings to the gods, and the daily life of the people. Most impressive was the height of the gigantic temples and the way they reached up like ladders to the stars. And then Calakmul. This city was Tikal's arch-rival, a major player on the Mayan stage of politics and warfare. Hidden in the dense jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, it proved far more difficult to discover than Tikal. Until the mid-20th century, the scale and significance of Calakmul was not fully understood. But with the power of modern archaeology, the scale of this lost city is beginning to be revealed. Covering an enormous area, it was like an open-air museum of the diplomatic intrigues and war strategies of the time. Each excavation offered a new detail of Maya life, completing a puzzle of history. But my friends, how can I end this story without mentioning Uxmal? Carved into the dry land of the Yucatan Peninsula, this city was a work of art in its aesthetics and architecture. Dazzled by 19th century European explorers, Uxmal revealed the engineering genius of the Mayans and their passion for art. The Pyramid of the Magician, an elliptical-shaped temple, still amazes archaeologists, paying homage to the incredible skills of this ancient people. Excavations have gradually brought each of these cities back to life. But the process was not easy. Dense jungles, archaeologists working in intense heat, and years of meticulous research despite modern technology. Each excavation uncovered secrets hidden beneath the soil. The carvings, the ceramics, the stone tablets, all of them were making the forgotten voices of the Mayans heard again. But my friends, with each discovery came new questions. The stories engraved on the walls of these cities still do not fully explain why they were abandoned. Modern archaeology finds new answers every day, but not all of the secrets these cities hold are solved. So what more will the temples of Tikal, the battles of Calakmul, and the magic of Uxmal tell us? And more importantly, what is the legacy of these lost cities for our world today? Let's pursue these questions in the next chapter. My friends, are you wondering what remains of the glory days of the Mayan civilization? Here is a story of both sadness and hope. Despite the harsh winds of time and man-made destruction, the spirit of the Mayan people has never faded. The remains of that ancient civilization are not just stone temples, mysterious inscriptions, or cities hidden in the jungle. The heart of the Maya people still beats today, their traditions, languages, and beliefs echoing in our modern world. First, let's look at the people who still proudly carry their Mayan roots today. In Central America, in places like Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, and Mexico, there are millions of people with Mayan ancestry. They carry the legacy of their ancestors not just as a memento, but as part of their daily lives. The diversity of Mayan languages alone shows how strongly culturally connected this people are. Aquiche, Yucatec, Cachiquel, and other languages have survived centuries of oppression. These languages are not only a means of communication, but also carry the worldview, beliefs, and ancestral wisdom of the Mayan people. One of the most striking legacies of the Mayan civilization is their agricultural and architectural genius. They still use an agricultural technique known as milpa, which preserves the natural balance of the soil by growing crops such as corn, beans, and squash together. This method of farming has fascinated even modern scientists because it is an early example of sustainable agriculture. The influence of Mayan architecture can also be felt in today's designs. Pyramid-like structures or symbolic motifs can be found not only in historical monuments, but also in modern designs. What about cultural rituals? My friends, the ancient beliefs of the Maya are still alive. In today's indigenous Mayan communities, there is a deep devotion to the sky and nature. New Year celebrations, agricultural festivals, and ceremonies at sacred sites show that traditions dating back thousands of years continue into modern life. Watching the rituals of the Mayan shaman touches the soul deeply. In these rituals, you feel an effort to strike a balance between nature and man. It is as if you go beyond time and open the door to an ancient world. The Mayan civilization has also profoundly influenced the modern world. Their calendar systems, mathematical knowledge, and achievements in astronomy have been a source of inspiration for modern science. Even today, the study of the Mayan calendar shows how complex and far-sighted their understanding of time was. Even modern tourism is influenced by the Maya, with thousands of people traveling from far and wide every year to see their cities and heritage. Listening to the stories of these cities is an unforgettable experience for visitors. But my friends, the story of the Mayan people is woven not only with the glories of the past, but also with the challenges of the present. Today's Mayan communities struggle with social and economic inequalities. But this struggle once again demonstrates their resilience and the strength of their spirit. Like their ancient ancestors, today's Maya people are sustained by their commitment to nature, their traditions, and each other. Now I ask you, does the heritage of this ancient people belong only to the past? Or does their story remind us of something we have forgotten in today's world? Perhaps this legacy holds the keys to shaping the future of humanity. In the next episode, we will explore together how the Mayan civilization can shed light on the big questions facing the modern world. Are you ready? My dear friends, we have taken a journey through time and dived deep into the fascinating world of the Mayan civilization. But now, as we come to the end of our journey, let's talk about how we can see the traces of the lasting legacy of this ancient civilization today. Because the legacy of the Mayan civilization is not just in the dusty pages of the past. Their extraordinary achievements in art, science, and philosophy still echo in our world today, like the sound of an ancient temple bell echoing in the forest. The elegance and aesthetics of Mayan art still nourish our souls. The elaborate reliefs that adorn the temple walls are filled with intricate stories of the bonds between gods and humans. This art is not only an element of beauty, but also a carrier of wisdom. Today, modern artists keep this ancient creative spirit alive by incorporating Mayan symbols and aesthetics into their own work. The majestic sculptures, geometric patterns, and exquisite pottery of the Maya remind us how powerful it is to use art as a means of communication. In science, the wisdom of the Mayans is particularly evident in their mastery of astronomy and mathematics. Their calendars not only organize daily life, but also serve as a key to understanding the cycles of the universe. Their long account calendar traces the cycle of time with an accuracy that impresses even modern scientists. Furthermore, their early mathematical systems using the concept of zero are one of the cornerstones of today's technology and scientific endeavors. The Maya passion for the stars was a guide not only to understanding the sky, but also to questioning man's place in the universe. And philosophy. My dear friends, the Mayan philosophy of life preaches living in deep harmony with nature and the universe. Man is not only a being that comes from the earth, he is also the bearer of a soul that comes from the stars, said an ancient Mayan wisdom. Their understanding of the cosmic order shows how humans can live as a part of nature without harming it. Today, this philosophy of the Mayans continues to guide us in our quest for sustainable living. The legacy of the Mayan civilization lives beyond the history books. Their creativity, wisdom, and view of the world shows that modern man still has much to learn. As I conclude this story, I leave you with this question. How can we use this unique legacy left to us by the Mayan people to build our own future? Perhaps the answer to this question is hidden in a nugget of ancient wisdom, hidden in the chaos of the modern world. So, my dear friends, on our next journey, let us continue to explore this bridge from the past to the future together. Because history is a never-ending story. What matters is what we learn from it.